Hello, Gary here, Pathways Homestead, and I'm outstanding in my field. Today I want to show you about our pasture and tell you kind of what we've done here and show you what we're doing to manage our pasture and to get the maximum output from our ground that we have here in Kansas. When Cindy and I bought this place, it was a soybean field. It wasn't a real productive soybean field. It only was making about 40 bushel an acre or so, and it wasn't real productive for soybean ground. And so when we bought it, we had to make the choice of what we were going to do with it. We planted a little wheat the first year that after the soybeans were cut, and then we planted a little wheat, and basically just used that as kind of a green manure crop, or to build organic matter in the soil. We just let it fall back in. We cut a little bit of it for hay, but it got wet on us, so we decided to turn this into pasture. We decided that Cindy and I would rather raise cattle than crops, and that we didn't have a tractor and equipment. We were dependent on borrowing equipment and neighbors helping us and stuff, so that it was better for us to run cattle. That was something we could come closer to doing on our own. And so we planted a pasture mix in this. We planted some fescue and some rye and some Austrian peas and Korean lespedeza. The first year we planted that, the only thing that really did any good and came up and grew was the Korean lespedeza, and we let that just grow that year. And then the next year it came up again a lot thicker, and it came up better, and we got fence fixed on it that year, and we pastured it. And this is, I think, our third year with the Korean lespedeza, and it's growing well, but we haven't used a lot of sprays because we've had a variety of other things in here too, some Austrian peas and some different brassicas for pasture and stuff like that. So we haven't used a lot of spray, so we have a lot of weeds, and we had weeds when we started, and we still have weeds. So today I want to show you kind of how we're dealing with the weeds. I'm going to try to get you a shot of the lespedeza and show you what that is that we're looking at and what we're using to fatten cattle with. And we've run 3 or 4 different set of feeder calves on this already in a couple of years, and so it is productive and it is doing well. We've probably been more food produced in running beef on this than there was soybeans. So I'm going to show you the lespedeza. You can see the lespedeza there. It's growing very well right now. July and August, with a little bit of rain, the Korean lespedeza grows really well. And there is a difference between Korean lespedeza and Sarisa lespedeza. And this is Korean. It's kind of a clover. It is considered a legume. It helps put fix nitrogen back in the soil. And it is very high in nutrients for cattle. That's funny. Some of that's bindweed, but that right there is Korean lespedeza. And the lespedeza that we've chosen is a soil builder. And as another thing we're doing to build the soil is we're going to take all these weeds that are popping up, and some of them are starting to put on seed heads, but hopefully we get most of them cut before they put on much of a seed head, and we're going to mow them. But I don't have a tractor and brush hog, and right now is a busy time to borrow neighbors' equipment. People are getting wheat ground ready and spraying and doing different things for their pastures. So I don't have a tractor and brush hog, but I do have a Craftsman lawnmower with a 42-inch deck. And so that's what we're going to be using today. We're going to use that to mow these weeds, and we've been mowing. What I've showed you just now is ground that I've mowed already. I'm more than halfway finished, but there's a lot of trips around the 9-acre pasture to mow it with a 42-inch mower. So we're gonna get some footage of that for you and show you kind of how that's working out. And I'm gonna show you what we're mowing. You can see how weedy that is, and you can see where I've mowed and where I haven't. And we're gonna try to get those weeds knocked down. That's how we're mowing our pasture, part of our weed control program. We grazed this down pretty hard with 10 head, and then we moved them off to another pasture. And so the Lespedeza was pretty low, and some of it's taken me, I've been mowing on this about a week. When I got started, it was just right, man. With the deck all the way up, I was cutting the weeds and not hardly hitting the Lespedeza. Now I'm starting to mow a little Lespedeza because we've had some good rain. Cattle off of it, and it's growing. We've got one calf in here, and that's it. But I also want to show you what we're actually trying to control. This is part of our weed control program, and the grazing hard and then moving the cattle off, that's part of our weed control program. And cutting the weeds at the right time. I'm getting to the end of that right time, but hopefully I can get it all done before it's too late. I've also had some mower problems and had to work on the mower. It took me a few days to get it running again. But we're trying to control cedar trees. And if you cut a cedar below the last limb, close enough to the ground that you're below the last limb, you'll kill that cedar tree. It won't come back. And so hopefully mowing this low, all the little cedars that are starting to come up, because we've got some big cedars over in the tree line, in the fence line. There's some little ones coming up. Hopefully we're getting them cut low enough that it's going to kill them. It's at least keeping them from getting big, but hopefully it kills them. We're controlling thistle. And when I started this, the thistle didn't have seed heads yet. It's starting to put on a seed head now. Hopefully we'll get it all mowed in the next day or two before it produces a mature seed. So we're cutting it off. Another thing that we have a lot of problems with here in this part of Kansas that is sprayed for a lot, and really, you know, a lot of people get upset about spraying, but man, if we didn't spray, if people didn't spray in this part of the world, it would look a lot different. And we have to somehow control noxious weeds, and sometimes spraying is the best choice. There are other ways, and if you're managing 50 acres, you can do things other ways. When you're managing 5,000, sometimes spraying is your choice. Right, we're not choosing to spray because we're managing 25 acres between the place and the lease. So, but one of the things, the noxious weeds that's huge here in Kansas that we have a big problem with is Sericea lespedeza. Sericea lespedeza was brought in during the Dust Bowl era to try to help control erosion. It is, in some parts of the world, it's pretty beneficial. Even in some parts of this country, it's pretty beneficial. It is something that you can bale for hay. It is pretty high protein, but here, the cattle won't hardly eat it. It gets stemmy real fast. It gets bitter. There's tannins in it, and the cattle won't hardly eat it, except for at a certain stage. And one of the ways we control it is to try to kill it or knock it down before it produces seeds. It does have to produce from seeds, so if you can keep the seeds from the plant from reproducing seeds, you can eventually get it to stop being productive. It'll quit growing because there's no more seeds for it to grow from. So right now the Cerisa does not have, there is some Cerisa in the fence line, there's some Cerisa, there's just birds carry it in, whatever, and so we've gotten some Cerisa, a little bit of Cerisa in our pasture. It does not have a seed head started yet. It does not have seeds started on it, so I'm mowing it down, keeping it from producing a seed head. Hopefully we get this mowed. We're going to do a few other things. We're going to put cattle back in here. Maybe I've knocked it down enough that they'll eat on it a little bit. Definitely where I put my goats, they eat it. Goats is a good management program for Cerisa. But hopefully we can keep it from producing the seed and in a year or two kill it out. And we'll have to keep doing that. That's just a constant thing you have to deal with because it is carried in by birds and different things, and it is in this part of the world. So, but that's some of the things we're trying to control: the thistles, the cedar, and the Cerisa. There's also, we've got mare's tail, and we've got goldenrod, and we've got all kinds of things. And some of those are just kind of a nuisance. The tall weeds, when the cattle are grazing, they can cause eye problems. Pink eye and different things like that get carried that way. Can get aggravated that way, so knocking the weeds down sure helps that too. But I'm going to try to show you some Cerisa Lespedeza and some Korean Lespedeza and try to show you the difference. All right, good example, bad cameraman. This right here is Cerisa Lespedeza. This is a very young, very small piece of Cerisa. This is not any seed head yet. We'll get it mowed down and get it killed off. And that is a noxious weed. In some places, in some parts of Oklahoma and further south, it's pretty useful. I mean, the cattle will graze it good, but here they won't. It has to do with our soil and our temperatures and our altitude, and it just puts on so much tannic acid the cattle won't eat it. And it'll take over a pasture fast if you don't do something to control it. But right next to it, this is where I got the Cerisa. This is Korean. See, it's a more clover looking. This doesn't produce the tannic acid, and it is a very good pasture in our part of the world. So this is what I'm trying to promote. This is what I'm trying to kill. Another thing right here that we want to get rid of, you can see the little elm tree. So hopefully mowing all those little trees will help knock them down, and they won't take over our pasture. I hope this gave you some information, kind of give you some ideas. One of the things I want to stress is that when you're managing a piece of property, when you're homesteading, you just have to figure out how to do what you need to do. We don't have a tractor, but we do have a lawnmower. An older lawnmower that I'm not too worried about beating up. I've set the deck up high and I'm mowing these weeds. It's going to take me a while. It's not the perfect scenario, but it's working. And so, you know, whatever you're doing, you can figure out a way to manage it with what you have most of the time. And you know that's part of homesteading, is just figuring out how to make do, make things work, and we enjoy this lifestyle, and using our brains to figure out how to make things work is part of this lifestyle. That might be a Frugal Friday tip, is to make do with what you have. But I just also want to tell you that it's important to try to control weeds. It's important in your pasture to do some kind of management. When you drive down the highway and you see beautiful rolling hills here in Kansas, let me tell you, those don't just happen. That there is some management practices. Burning is a huge management practice here in the Flint Hills of Kansas. A lot of pasture is burnt to control sericea, to control thistle, to control cedar trees, to control those things. The burning hadn't worked out perfect with our Korean. We didn't want to kill it out, so we're choosing to mow. But also, part of when you drive down the road and you see the pastures, the way they're grazed has something to do with the management of weeds. How many head they put on them, whether they put more or less, and stuff like that, that has something to do with it. And so I'm out standing in my field just to tell you today that make sure you're trying to manage your pastures, do something about the weeds, and to make do with what you have. So I hope that you know that you are loved by God, and I hope that you're richly blessed today. And this is Gary, and I'll see you later.